Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast Persistent Managers, the podcast dedicated to helping managers and direct reports win. So, I want to talk to you guys and kind of end this year on mistakes I've made and some things I'm going to be carrying into 2025. So, I had my phone, just a couple keywords, and kind of took some time to reflect on this episode. So, one of the big mistakes I made was delaying my MBA. I actually didn't get into the program I wanted, and I took it pretty tough because I wanted that one. The good news is, once I got on the other side of that situation, is I actually ended up getting into a better MBA program that allowed me to balance work life and family better. So I guess I start with that first mistake I made of delaying something you want, is because there's this fear of failure. I know the first time I had to go back to college after I was a dropout and finish my BA was that I was really nervous because it was a lot of intense nights, a lot of relearning. But I eventually got through it, and that speaks character to who I am, and I think that could speak character to you. So action will always beat hesitation. That's just reality. So that's one of the mistakes I made, was that I hesitated too much in my action. And in reality, if you're thinking about going back to school, you're thinking about doing an MBA, the benefit you have to yourself is that you can test theory in the real life. Like, I don't have to like wonder if this is something that's applicable. I can apply it in real time. Luckily, somebody I know in my professional life went through the same thing. He said it was one of the best things for him. So the mistake I made was allowing hesitation to beat me rather than action. The next mistake I made was I tend to overthink too much. I am somebody who values data a lot more now. I'd say in my younger years, I didn't think data was something that was interesting. I thought it was really boring. I remember when I would be in algebra class, the teacher would say, everything in life is sales and math. And in the back of my mind, I thought, no, it isn't. And now that I'm older and I've kind of lived life and worked and had some successes and failures in corporate America and training, I'm like, you know what? I think that algebra teacher in that summer school program that I had to make up that grade was absolutely right. So I say that to you because I'm an overthinker. I tend to wait to get all the numbers, but data has a deadline. So you can have all the numbers you want, and I think you need to have that because data will always be a better friend to you than your gut or intuition. Sorry, it's just the way it is. But at some point, you have to call the shot. So don't always hesitate too much. Give your data a deadline, and don't get caught up too much in paralysis of analysis. Another thing, a mistake I made was focusing on tasks that didn't align with my long term goals. So I'll give you an example. So I do love stand up comedy. It's something I did when I went back to get my degree, side hustle work, a lot of different things to make sure that I could complete my bachelor's in organizational behavior, leadership practice, and principles. And when I had to look at stand up comedy and where it lives in my life now, when I calculated the hours it took to go from setting up the mic to preparing your set, thinking about your keywords, your punchlines, there's so much that goes into just a 5 minute joke. It's not just 5 minutes. And I said to myself, if I really took all this 5 minutes, whatever set, and the hours it takes to make it crisp clean every 7 to 10 seconds to get a punchline, what if I just put it over into another program? What if I just put my attention there? Take 1 or 2 hours back from it and put it into an MBA program, or into a new skill. And that's something I had to let go of. I had to let go of doing things that I thought were fun to align myself more with my long term goals. So that's a mistake I made that I'm going to correct in 2025, is saying no to those fun things so I can get closer to those better, stronger things that make me better in my career, better in my company, better with my manager. So those are some key mistakes I made. Another key mistake I made was I struggle with what they call conditional thinking. Conditional thinking, in very plain sense, is because you do X, you think Y should happen. My kids and my wife actually came up with a song like conditional thinking, X equals Y. conditional thinking, you should accept reality. Now, always makes me laugh. I say that song that we have as an inside joke because I think sometimes I'm not alone in it. I'm not alone in the fact that because when I was in sales, the toughest thing about sales, which was one of my first early careers, I did very well in top 10%, winner's circle. The toughest thing about being in sales is that you don't know where your next yes is going to come from. You're making hundreds of calls, ton of rejection, and you don't know who your why is going to be. And that's what's so tough. And when I started looking at this year and why I was frustrated about certain things I wasn't getting, is because I felt that if I did X enough times, Y would happen. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But you have to stay with something long term to also make sure it gives you the right outputs. Yeah, I did comedy for 5 years, or I still do it now as a hobby very occasionally because I'm working on other different successes I want to define my life by. But I learned a ton of skills. I learned how to stay uncomfortable with in the uncomfort of doing facilitation and training. I learned how to not take things too personally. I learned what the difference was in terms of feedback in who someone is personally versus how to make something better. I think that's a huge thing that a lot of managers struggle with. And I think sometimes direct reports when communicating upline we struggle in how to give the skill of feedback. We don't know how to keep the feedback on the project, not the person. I've said it before. I had a manager like 7, 8 years ago, I don't know how long, who said, "You should fix your face." Like, that was a statement. You should fix your face. How am I supposed to fix that? Here's the thing. He was actually trying to get to a point of saying, I think if you smile more, you can help these customers and get more sales. But his intent didn't come out. And I think that's a big thing. And that's a little bit of a rant that I wanted to go on. But conditional thinking is something that a mistake I made and not being there. So I want to talk to you about some lessons I'm going to be carrying over into 2025. So, lesson one, again, start sooner. Action beats hesitation. The earlier you start, the sooner you grow. And I think that's a huge one that I think we all need to work with and align on that together. The next lesson I'll be carrying is some framework. So, as I said, I started this MBA program, finished my first semester. Everything went pretty well, late nights. But there are some frameworks I want to share with you in my Management Foundations class that I think will help you, even if you're never going to do an MBA program. This is applicable. The first thing is AIM, audience intent message. So that's if you're going to use a PowerPoint presentation, you can structure your outline on who is your audience, what is your intent for them, and what's the message you want to walk away with. So that's a good framework. Another framework which will help you is PREP, which stands for point, reason, example, point. So a point could be your data. Your reason for showing that data is simply that you want to communicate what it says. And here's an example of how that data is interpreted and recap that point again. If you've done Toastmasters like I have, and I've been the president of one before, again, when I tell you these things, I hope you don't take it as I'm bragging. I'm just pulling from my past experiences. But in Toastmasters, it's tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. So again, that's just something to kind of laterally sell you on using the framework of prep in your next presentation, facilitation, etc. And here's something that's for everyone is a framework called the FAIR framework. This one probably had the most impact on me in my semester for this MBA, this program, which stands for Facts, Access, Impacts, Respect. Let me say that again. It's Facts, Access, Impacts, Respect. So let's say you're sending an email and you're concerned what the message is going to be. And it could be a robust email. It could be something really strong. You can use the FAIR Act to simply just say, hey, like, is this factual? Let me assess it let me see how accessible it is. And what's the impact and how respectful is the tone of this email if I decide to send this email to the individual, group, etc., whatever that may be. So those are just some really strong frameworks that I think really came out of my MBA program. Honestly, another weird thing, and this isn't on my talking points, was the importance of white space. Most managers, I would say majority, and direct reports, especially in the executive director level, they really want things to be simple and have white space so it's easily skimmable and readable. Something I've always said when I've been writing scripts for tons and thousands of people is like simplicity, scale, sales. Those are the three S's of creating good selling content. Is simplicity, scale, sales. The more easy and simple your scripts are, the more scalable it is in messaging. Because good sales training is about helping people buy, not making them feel like they're sold to. But that's just a different rant for another time. So, another lesson I'll be carrying into 2025, something that I've also made the mistake of not doing as much in 2024, is celebrating the small wins. And I struggle with that. I struggle with not celebrating those small wins for me. I'll tell you who my heroes are personally. And I do read a healthy amount of books. I'd say most I skim, most I read. There's not many books I can just sit there and read for an hour. I think most of them are about just kind of making money. And obviously, in the process of writing this other piece of content, literature, which is a totally different conversation I won't like to talk about until it's done, because I'm kind of one of those people. But one of my heroes is actually my boy. He did Pee Wee football this season, and he went through the whole process, and he cried every practice. If you've never done Ohio Pee Wee football, it's insane. Practices are usually 3 days a week, 2-hour practices, and then games are on the weekends. One of those days are like 2 hours. It's an intense culture. But he cried every practice because they made him run. Probably ran more than I did in high school when I played football. And we went through this entire season. It was an emotional journey. There were times where I was like, I gotta pull this kid out of football. But he would cry, and I wouldn't let him because I said, listen, boy, I'm not gonna use his name just because I want to keep some privacy. I said, listen, my boy. I said, what you're feeling is hard work. You want to fall in love with this feeling. You want to embrace it. And on the other side of it is hard work. And then he started running, and I thought in my head, I'm the worst dad ever. Because I'm like, what am I doing to this kid? We go to his ceremony, and I was out of town. My wife ended up taking him. I was super mad that I missed it. And the whole time he would run all his practices, I'm going to quit football. I'm going to finish the season, Dad, but I'm quitting. And he even said at the ceremony, I go to this party. I'm out of town for a work event, and I get a call from my wife, and she goes, "You're not going to believe this, but he wants to do football again." And I was like, "What?" I said, "Well, what changed?" I said, "Well, it was really cute. They gave him all the trophies and everything." And he came up to me and he said, "I want to be with the same team and the same coach." She goes, "Why with the same coach? Like, what happened?" And the coach ended up saying something to my boy that I think is really transferable to direct reports and managers. He asked him, he said, "Hey, are you going to be playing football next year?" And he goes, "No." And he goes, "Why not? We need you." And he comes back to the table. This is when my wife's telling me this about my boy. And he says, "I know this is going to sound crazy I'm going to say, but I think I secretly liked all the running, even though it was hard." I think we all secretly like hard work at times. Maybe not some, but I think most. If we really give ourselves a chance to feel and fall in love with what hard work feels like. And I think what makes it more enjoyable is when we're needed. Like when he heard those words from his coach, his favorite one, because he had three, it changed and reframed for him, I believe, that all that running was not for nothing. And all that running we do in those projects are not for nothing. And all the running you don't see your manager do is not for nothing because it's a good feeling to be needed. So celebrate those small wins and focus on your purpose. Align those tasks with goals. As I said earlier, it's hard for me to let go of doing comedy, but I know years from now it's going to pay off. So something I want you to think about. There's a really good podcast. It has a lot of swear words. It's called The Game by Alex Hermosi. But I like something he said in one of his episodes where he said, "We overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 4." That statement for me helped me to let go of comedy easier. That's just something to think about. So the last thing I want to end on is mistake I've made, something I'm going to carry over is asking for help more. Especially if you're in a position where you have a lot of resources in the company or whatnot, raise your hand, ask for help. It is never a done thing. Give me an example is I've done like tons of training. I make follow up calls 17 to 30 days. And it feels like when I make these calls, people have more questions in the phone call conversations than at the end of training. Sometimes training ends and people will rush out of there like they rush out of church on Sunday to get to their car, I see, because they just want to get to the next thing instead of slowing down and taking advantage of that moment. And I know that that's something that I'm going to be doing more is raising my hand, asking for help because I think a lot of times we think it's weak or falls on our shoulders. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of that even in school. But here's the reality. When you write a paper, you are respected if you have more sources, if you sought out the information. It's the same thing in a company. You source yourself out to SMEs, get that data from those subject matter experts. And it's the same kind of idea, just a different environment. So asking for help. And I think the one thing I'm going to end on this episode is a story that always helps me around the holiday season to stay present. Because that's something I struggle with is staying present who I am and where I want to go. So here's the story. There's a story of a man who is starting to have chest pain, stress in his chest, and he goes to see his doctor he's been seeing for 10 years. And they run all these tests on the man. They check his cholesterol, they check everything. And all of a sudden, the tests show that there's nothing wrong with him. And his doctor comes in the room and he says, "Well, can you give me anything anyways? I'm still having these chest pains. I'm not sure what's causing it." He says, "I've been your doctor for 10 years. Do you trust my medical professional opinion?" The guy goes, "Well, absolutely. My family, everything." And he goes, "I want you to visit a graveyard 2 to 3 times a week." And the man instantly gets angry with the doctor. He goes, "Listen, I don't have time for this. Like, I'm a busy business guy. I've got a family, insurance. There's a lot. Nobody can really handle my workload. I'm the only one who can do what I do." He goes, "Well, again, you told me you were going to trust my professional medical opinion. As you walk around that graveyard, I want you to look at the names and the headstones because many of those people have been my patients and they've sat where you're sitting, said the same thing. Nobody can do what I do. I'm irreplaceable, and yet they're buried in the ground, and somebody is doing what they're doing." The man takes the doctor's advice, goes around, begrudgingly starts looking at the name of the headstones, walks around the graveyard. Interestingly enough, the man starts to stay longer with his kids at night when he's reading them a story. He spends an extra 3 to 5 minutes reading that kid's book or rubbing his kids back just to sing them a song so he can help them fall asleep better. He starts to let some fires burn where he prioritizes that after 9 o'clock he should spend more time watching a show with his partner rather than leaving her so he can go downstairs and do more work. He starts doing these little tiny things to have more gratitude, stay more present in what he has in his family, in the blessings he already has, the wins he has around him. And he goes to see his doctor, they do the checkup, and all his levels are fine. And the doctor goes, "You've clearly been taking your medicine," which is gratitude. See, the man in that parable had so much stress. He felt it was on his shoulders. He wasn't asking for help. He had everything there. And the prescription was just gratitude, staying present. So, my hope for you is that you have more gratitude this season. Stay present. I'm not trying to get religious. No, no way, shape, or form. I'm simply saying it's a good habit to stay present, celebrate your wins, because I know I'm going to learn from my mistakes in 2024. I'm going to be taking these insights to win more in 2025. That's what Paul Leon's going to do. And I'm confident if you're listening to this that you'll probably take some of this and win too. But if you take anything away from this overall, is that go into 2025 with more gratitude so you can reduce those stress levels and win more, not just in the workplace, but at home too. Because that's where the real winning counts at the end of the day. Goodbye, 2024. Hello, 2025. Look forward to serving, helping more of you. And that's managers and direct reports winning together. And that's the mission of this podcast. Take care, guys. Have a good holiday season.